I'm just going to give you a really short talk, and then we'll focus really on the questions and that. Steve's given you a really good background, so you'll probably know a whole bunch about single step already now. So you probably don't need a lot more background there. So really, this has been a team effort to develop the single step stuff. So we've been So the start date for this was really about 2014, so we've been going now for about 4 years, I guess, into this. And really the main goal for this particular piece of work was to really develop a seamless evaluation system where we could include your genotype data into evaluations. And we've probably gone a long distance. You would have remembered back to SIL-ACE and a whole bunch of other evaluations. We've migrated now to a large national evaluation, which you'll know as NZGE. And another one of the goals here was to move to a much more modern computing infrastructure. And then we've jumped now to 2017, so probably between that period 2014 to 17, we've developed this infrastructure and we've done basically a whole bunch of testing, but I don't really need to go into that. The testing really has been to show that the predictions that we're producing out of a single step system are better than what you'll get from just using pedigree alone. And there's also a whole bunch of other testing looking at, do we see any strange effects? We call them the statistician's bias in that. We want to make sure they're not present in this this new single-step system that we're wanting to roll out. So we're at 2017. So in 2018 we've started what we've called a beta test. We've pulled in about 25,000 genotypes from about 23 maternal breeds, and they've been all pushed through this single-step system. We're at about 80,000 genotypes now in the sheep industry for maternal breeds. So in February 2018, we've basically started to roll out results to the single-step breeders. I think they've only had them for a few months now. So what I would basically summarise in a few short bullet points is, what are you guys going to see with this new single-step system? So the most important thing from my perspective is a better comparison between genotyped and non-genotyped animals across and within breed. So that's been probably the key issue for me, is removing all those strange things we call bias that you've seen in the old system. And we do a whole bunch of testing to ensure that the single-step breeding values that you will get are basically better than the pedigree alone predictions. So you've got to basically treat that as a given. The genomic breeding values will be more accurate. And then really it is about best use of any data you have at that particular time. In the old genomic system we call multi-step, Steve alluded to it as well, that we do a calibration once every, potentially year or even up to 18 months, and then really your data gets outdated and it's not used optimally. But with the new single step, on a weekly basis, we will be doing essentially a recalibration each week and using that data optimally. So no more recalibration. So you won't see these big jumps every time we do one as well, and where you get major re-rankings in sires. And then, so that's already got. So for those folk that don't use genomic technologies, and I've heard a lot of people say, this genomic stuff, it's just polluting all our evaluations and that. What we can show is that there will be actually few, if any, changes you will see if you're not using genomics and if you're not connected to other flocks that are doing genomics. But it will actually allow you better comparisons with animals that are also genomically tested as well. So what next? We're releasing more results out to the beta test breeders, and this will be in this calendar month. And then we will be running the single step in parallel with your NZGE evaluation, right out to when we go live with the single step. And we're predicting in September, October, we'll be basically doing a full rollout of the single step. And for those people that are using genomics, you'll see changes in rankings in that at first, but staff from Beef and Lamb Genetics will contact you, and we'll basically help you through and talk you through the impacts of those changes. So really, we will also write up a best practice guide for using single step. But generally, you know, that guide roughly is around, we do need you to keep sending in your keeper sires, essentially, your key sires in your flocks, and they need to be genotyped at a higher density. And this is not because we're using them in a reference population, it's because we perform a process called imputation with the genotype data initially, and it's that pre-processing step that we need those key sires mainly now. But also they're a valuable asset for future R&D as well. So you still need to participate in the progeny tests where connectedness and that is really still an important thing. So it's essentially just business as usual for the single step, but for those doing genomics, it'll be essentially better comparisons that you can make and better use of your data. And just as a couple of examples, I've got on the left-hand slide just one flock. So the red crosses are genotyped animals. So this is one flock that's doing genomic testing. So most of these animals are actually young progeny that have been tested. So this is one flock from the beta test flock. And so you'll see a lot more changes in the red genotyped animals. In the black, these are non-genotyped animals in that flock. You'll see less changes. So the point here is that animals in the single step system, now those without genomic data will also change. So some of that accuracy from the genotyped animals will get passed on, generally to first degree relatives or close relatives. And then on the right-hand slide, I've got on the x-axis or the horizontal axis, I've just got the EBVs, and on the vertical axis, it's the single step GBVs, okay, graphs. So in an ideal world, if they were exactly the same, you'd just see a diagonal line at 45 degrees. So in the non-genotype flock, that doesn't do a lot of genomics, you're basically just seeing a straight line. Their EBVs and their GBVs from the single step essentially don't change. Okay, so that's just two small examples. I've probably stared at thousands of graphs over the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm pretty happy with the single step evaluations. I think they're a big improvement on what we're currently doing, and really keen to actually roll on and move and start using those evaluations. And I think that's all I need to say.
Matt and Andrew have both been involved with the beta testing. What attracted you to sort of be involved with the beta testing, and what do you see the benefits from your flock by using the single step? Andrew first.
Yeah, we've been using genomics for a number of years, or pretty much since it sort of first rolled out. And for us, we saw the advantages for us of actually having better accuracies. And there's been a number of advantages for us. I've just got a few notes here, so I'll just read through them. So for us, we use a lot of ram hoggets and for mating, and just to get more accurate information on those ram hoggets before we actually use them. particularly for traits like reproduction. Sort of rather than waiting 2 or 3 years till they've had progeny, we've got more accurate information based on their DNA before we actually use them. So that's been a big plus. Also, there's some of those other traits, like sort of facial eczema, we've been selecting for that for the last 5 years as well, and obviously harder to measure, and getting some accurate information on that's been really useful. I mean, we do parentage anyway because we lamb our ewes out on the hill, and so we can't record lambs at birth, so it's been a real advantage having that extra DNA information on those animals because we've got the DNA in the system. And the other big plus is the major genes that come through with it as well. We've been selecting for Myomax and improving our meat yields, and that's we've made some really good progress here. So having that information on the animals, right from the start, has been a plus. And just this last year, we've been also looking at exporting a few rams over to UK, and with the latest testing, we've had scrapie typing on those animals as well. So that's been a real benefit for us too.
And Matt?
Yeah, Andrew's probably, well, I could basically repeat what Andrew said, and we're seeing exactly the same, I'd call them opportunities that it's providing for us. And I suppose one thing is we see it as innovative technology. And I suppose as an industry we can sort of sit here and say, is the status quo good enough? Or there's actually an opportunity that I suppose is being presented to us to embrace it. And let's move forward. But I think what Single Step will do, it'll help us move forward at a faster pace than what we've been going at. Obviously, there's a quicker turnaround with information in and out, and I think to breeders, that's going to be a big plus. And as Andrew alluded to, there's the ability to identify genetic potential in younger animals, which obviously at the end will speed up genetic gain. So we're very happy. I mean, we're actually excited to be part of it, and we see it as an opportunity to actually help take the whole industry forward. So I think it's just all I can say is let's embrace this new technology. And also we're pretty lucky. We've got guys like Michael Lee, world-class scientists working for us to actually help improve the whole sheep industry as a whole.
Rightio, thank you. So we'll open it up to the floor now. So yeah, like before, just put your hand up and wait for the mic, and just address to who exactly you're asking the question, or it might just be a general question to the whole panel.
Yeah. So the single step really is basically, the calculator that sits amongst it all, and really the equations that sit behind it are really, if you look back to the 1950s, they were derived then. So there hasn't actually been a lot of change as such in the maths and that behind it. But what's important is that each population is quite different. So Steve over in the US, he's working in Angus, and it's a fairly homogeneous population with what we call a effective population sizes, that it's probably smaller than a lot of the breeds that we have. So in the context of the New Zealand sheep industry, we are actually looking at I would say a much more complex evaluation. You want us to put in Romneys, Coopworths, Perrindales, composites, and probably you'll be asking for Dorpers and Wiltshires and things in the future and that. So it's actually difficult, but also a much more challenging exercise to actually do evaluations on more complex breeds. So one size fits all doesn't actually work. A lot of the work that is done around the single step is actually dependent on the population you're working for. So the evaluation part of it that sits in the middle is only a small part. Everything else around it, like the meat module, the models and everything, are part of that as well, and probably form a big majority of that work. So the single step is only a component, but it a bit the key component that sits in the middle. I don't know if I've answered your question around that, Will. Yep.
Anyone else? Any questions?
So, yeah, I've got one.
Yeah.
So, Michael, like for people that are, they're not genotyping in their home flock, but let's say they participate in a progeny test where that ram is genotyped, or if they've sold a ram to somebody that is genotyping in their flock, what happens there to the home flock's breeding values?
So the genomic information will actually influence the progeny and close relatives of that animal. So they may see some minor re-ranking, not as substantial as if the animal in the flock were itself genotyped, but there will be some genomic information influencing the relatives of that flock. So there will be some changes.
Yeah, Michael, I've just got another question. I mean, we had some issues with when we had the National Genomic Evaluation. We were testing 20% of our ram lambs, and what we found is that those tested were actually, the average dropped compared to non-tested animals. You've said that will improve, so how much better will a single step sort of give to accuracy?
So what you're describing has probably happened in a bunch of flocks that I know of, and I've probably had a few sleepless nights over that, but really it is a consequence of the older system where we use a process where we call blending. But it's essentially the older system is where we take results from different evaluations and try and combine them to give you one answer. And innately, that's probably not a good thing to do. We keep telling you, don't compare evaluations between evaluations. And in the old system, we've been trying to combine information or results from different evaluations. And that's been the best that we could do at that date, and it's been okay, but it has been problematic, I know, for a number of flocks when you compare genotyped to non-genotyped animals. But for everything I've seen, the single step actually resolves that and it removes that bias. And I've looked at so many graphs to check that, so I'm pretty comfortable that you won't be seeing that kind of bias anymore.
Hi, Michael. Natalie over here. I'm just wondering, could you describe the benefits, like in the rate of genetic gain that these genotype flocks might get? Will it double, triple?
Well, it's a money question, really. And at the end of the day, it's a function of the accuracy increase, but also the date when you actually can start making those decisions. And the date that you will be able to make better breeding decisions based on the genomics will be obviously earlier, and particularly important for a lot of those traits that are measured late in life or sex determined or difficult to measure in that. And the accuracy increases. We generally do what we call a validation exercise to show that the single step or anything we do does actually increase prediction accuracy over what we're currently doing at the moment. We haven't actually done an economic evaluation of the whole, what the single step will actually contribute. And I suspect it's actually quite a difficult exercise to give you $1 a single figure value, because if I look at a lot of the flocks, there's actually a lot of difference in the accuracy gain between flocks. Flocks that have been doing genomics for a long time, been genotyping a lot of animals, and good pedigree recording and phenotyping, actually will probably get a sizable lift in accuracy. Whereas those flocks that probably have just been dabbling a bit, there's probably going to be reasonable but moderate gains in that. So one size fits all, I think, is going to be difficult. But my short answer is we haven't actually looked at the dollar values and actually worked out the economic gain from a transition to the single step.
Sharon, have you got any comments you'd like to make? Microphone, please.
Well, with that comment from Natalie too, like at the end of the day, the breeders still make the decision choices, and they find their own balance between the things we don't measure and the things we do provide you information on. So to come up with one number would be quite hard, but certainly when I did some of the testing, the flow to the progeny to me was one of the biggest assets. So particularly for traits like facial eczema, where current system you only get information on the animal that's actually tested. Now if that animal is a sire, we can track the inheritance through his family like Steve Miller showed, and we can make some estimates on unmeasured animals. So when you go to test animals, you've already got, you know, a selection criteria of who might be the best candidates to do. So, you know, I think there's some real pluses in this.
Yeah. So I think just one number to tell you this is the value for it. It's actually a difficult number to deliver, and probably, you know, somewhat unrealistic. You could have a national value, but you know the variation between flocks will be probably quite substantial. So at the end of the day, it is a tool, and you know it's not my job how you know well, you know, you guys are probably best to actually figure out how best to use that tool.
Michael, I'd just like to comment that, you know, we're spending the money on the parentage anyway, so anyone who's doing parentage testing, which is improving the accuracy of pedigrees as well, I mean, it's not that much more to add in the genomics as well. So, yeah. You know, to me, it's a no-brainer. Yeah. And if you can make extra genetic gain, well, you know, it's a great way of doing it.
Yeah, so it's really not only the genomic predictions that are helpful here, it's also, you know, those single gene marker effects like Myomax, Scrapian that have been described, and you know, we'll be looking at also inbreeding coefficients. So in a way, the genomic testing gives you a package of goods, and the genomic predictions and the increase in accuracy really are what you want, but there's also a lot of other value hidden in that package as well.
Just one last question from Will.
Michael, Will Morrison again, and you gave an intro before, because I have Wiltshires and I'm sitting next to a Corriedale breeder, and I guess there are a bunch of smaller or unique breeders around, and I guess my question is where do the smaller breeds start? How do we engage with single step, and what role does it have for those smaller breeds?
Yeah. So one part of the testing that we do is that we ensure that you're actually getting a prediction accuracy over and above what you get with just pedigree alone. So in order for us to do that, we need a bunch of animals with decent accuracy, typically I would say 80, 90% hopefully, but we've had to make do with probably less than that. But I'd probably need 400 or 500 of those animals with genotypes as well in order to start testing that. Because we need to make sure, yes, we can, in the context of NZG, fit the genomic evaluation for your subpopulation into that evaluation. So we do need that testing infrastructure to work with. So really it is about phenotype, and do your recording as per usual well, but also think about, okay, do I need to get some animals tested at a higher density and genotype for us to do the imputation part of it, but also start looking at, okay, do I want to start including genotyping via a SNP chip rather than just DNA parentage into that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, all the speakers from the first session. We'll wrap it up here. If you just show your appreciation for Michael and the panel. So, I mean, that was a pretty good insight into the single step, I thought. I mean, for me, there's a few key points. I mean, people that are thinking or are already doing your gene testing, I mean, the key to me is don't think it's going to replace your phenotypic recording. The phenotypic data is key. You need that to keep validating the genotyping. So you've got to keep doing both. And with the single step and your gene testing, it's another tool in the toolbox. Yes, things may re-rank, but they're re-ranking for the right reasons. EBVs are becoming more accurate. And as Steve said earlier, isn't it better you know now, so you can make those right decisions? We all hear about sort of you use 3 rams or 3 bulls, and one will take you forwards and one won't do much and one might take you backwards. So if you can find out in advance which ones not to use, that's just as important as finding out which one to use. So you just keep doing that steady gain. And so thanks for everyone this morning.